I don't know when you're watching this, dear viewer, but at the time of recording, it is currently Christmas Day. In the past, Christmas used to bring people so much joy, but with each year that passes, many find themselves feeling much less enthused with it. I did a poll whereby I asked you all, would you say the festive season is getting worse or better? 56% of you said that it's getting worse, 34% of you said that it's around the same, whereas just 10% of you said that it's getting better. Some would say that this is just a part of getting older, but I disagree. The truth is that with each year that passes, Christmas really has been slowly losing its mojo, and with good reason. A reason that most people feel, but don't quite know why. A long time ago, I made a production that attempted to explain this phenomena of decline. Today, I have remastered said production, for it is only aged like wine, and will only continue to do so. This is how consumerism killed Christmas. Let us start with a brief history lesson of Christmas. Christmas is an event that has been around now for hundreds of years and was always intended to be a day of celebration. A day whereby people around the world celebrate the birth of the key central figure of the world's most populous religion, Jesus Christ. Awkward. The first recorded Christmas was celebrated in the year 336 in Rome. Yeah, that's right, it took over 3 centuries after the birth of Christ for Christmas to even become a thing. This was mostly because birthdays weren't really celebrated that much back then, and such logic even included Jesus' birthday as well. Now, because by the year 336 it had been so long since the birth of Christ, and naturally history wasn't as organised as it is today, no one knew for sure what day Jesus was actually born. Some said it was February, whereas others said April and even August. Ultimately, the date of December 25th was chosen, not necessarily for absolute accuracy, but more as it was the date of the winter solstice for the Romans. The fact that Rome was the essential birthplace of Christmas is most ironic, considering that in the year 64 under Emperor Nero, Christians used to actually be tortured in colosseums for entertainment. Meanwhile, 200 years later in the year 380 under Emperor Constantine, Christianity would actually become the state religion of the Roman Empire. A fine example of how societies slowly transform their opinions over many centuries. And speaking of change, a lot of you might think then that Christmas and the mass popularity of the day must have stayed pretty much the same since its inception. But believe it or not, Christmas was a most controversial topic throughout much of history. In fact, would you believe me if I said that in my own nation of England, that Christmas was actually banned for over a decade, from 1647 to 1660, by the then ruling Puritans, who viewed Christmas as an unchristian event that was merely an excuse to get drunk. Which, to be fair, it probably was. This attitude was also adopted by the Pilgrims over in America, who would often protest Christmas by working on the day to show their utter discontent and disregard of it. And much like in England, Christmas would eventually be banned in the Boston area in 1659, which would only be overturned decades later in 1681. But even after having been unbanned in England and parts of America, Christmas would retain having a negative reputation. It wouldn't be until 200 years later in 1843, with the release of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, would the day start to see a more positive resurgence. This book redefined Christmas, not as a day of drunken disorder, but a day whereby one could spend time with their family, exchange gifts, eat a succulent meal, and have a jolly good time indeed. And as such, these renewed perceptions greatly increased the popularity of Christmas across much of the English-speaking world. But it wasn't just here whereby Christmas was critiqued. After the French Revolution, France embraced a doctrine of state atheism, whereby the, and I am not making this up, cult of reason banned the day outright, before collapsing in on itself just a year later. And of course, just in the last century, the staunchly atheistic communist nations had a hugely negative attitude to the day, such as in the Soviet Union, whereby the, and again I promise I'm not making this up, League of Militant Atheists aimed to, and I quote, exterminate religion in all its manifestations. Ah, how history repeats. But regardless of its rocky past, today Christmas stands as an almost universally recognised day across the Western world and beyond, and has been now for over a century. However, much like how Rome went from being a nation that would torture Christians in colosseums to becoming a Christian nation themselves, or how Christmas went from being rejected and even outright banned to being a mass accepted event, over the last 50 years or so, the very nature of Christmas Day has also slowly started to transform. And not a lot of people have really noticed, mostly as the changes occurred so slowly year by year. What subtle change am I talking about, I hear you ask? A change towards consumerism. Most people tend to not really know what the definition of consumerism actually is. Many tend to get it mixed up with capitalism, which, though similar, is not the same. Think of capitalism as someone having a beer, whereas consumerism is someone who is an alcoholic. Too much of something pointlessly. Specifically, there are two types of consumers. First are those who consume as an addiction. Addictive consumerism comes in a wide array of forms. Food addiction, for example, is most commonplace. Here you can see a living chart of obesity rates in the United States from 1985 to 2010. Notice how with every year that passes, obesity only continues to visibly increase state by state, with it getting so bad that entire new categories have to be invented in the key just to keep up. In 1965, roughly 50% of American men were obese or overweight, a number which has now reached an estimated 80%. And the numbers for women are somehow even worse, having gone from 40% to 80% in the same amount of time. And keep in mind, all of these graphs end in 2010. The situation is almost guaranteed to be even worse today. But it's not just food, and it's not just America. Deaths related to alcohol consumption in the UK have also soared. The Office of National Statistics reported that in 2019 there were 7,500 deaths related to alcohol, the highest since records began in 2001. And just a year later in 2020, this number had increased to almost 9,000, once again the highest since records began. And most of these deaths were of course in the poorer parts of the country, such as the north of England, aka the most ignored place in Western Europe. And yes, you bet I'm going to use this as another opportunity to point out how much I despise London. I despise London. But regardless, food and alcohol addictions are quite well known, but addictive consumerism can also be found in places you may not necessarily expect, such as video games. Now, of course, though our beloved video games aren't directly addicting, many, particularly young people, undeniably often find themselves totally transfixed in virtual worlds, such as MMORPGs, as a sort of replacement for reality. A place whereby they can have the illusion of progress as opposed to the real world, which today often seems so overly complex that it almost feels impossible to do so. The Japanese have been distinctly aware of this issue for quite some time, with the rise of the hikikomori culture, where thousands of young people spend all day inside their rooms like hermits with almost zero real-life aspirations, permanently in a state of virtual distraction. Addictive consumers tend to be so, mostly out of desperation, helplessness, and a lack of self-control. To use the examples listed earlier, people often eat, drink, and play a lot because it makes them happy, and temporarily provides them with a feeling of relief that helps them forget and distract from their problems. Naturally, despite the short-term relief they provide, such acts do of course often lead to long-term physical and mental health problems. A most sympathetic situation. A not-so-sympathetic situation is the second type of consumer. Those who consume for social status. In the past, people could only buy what they needed, such as food and other essentials. But as industrialization and manufacturing advanced, products started to be made not necessarily out of need, but want. The wealthy started to flaunt their wealth by buying flashy products, which in turn inspired the middle class and poor to want to emulate them by doing the same. Arguably the worst example of this is in the fashion industry, whereby every few months, clothes designers arbitrarily declare that something is in, whereby social status consumers will then go out of their way to buy such clothes, completely disregarding their current wardrobe, despite there being no real reason to do so. And though the wealthy can often participate in this farce effortlessly, the poor imitators are often left foolishly bankrupt in their desperate attempts to prove their social status to the world. And this logic can also be spectated in a variety of other products, such as smartphones and even graphics cards, whereby only the latest and greatest will suffice. We have even started to create products that have no purpose whatsoever other than to be collected and showcased, such as what has slowly started to inadvertently become the ugly face of consumerism, Funko Pops. These ugly clumps of plastic modelled after mass-market fictional characters and celebrities are seemingly designed to cater to the lowest common denominator of society at large. Many thousands of Funko Pop collectors around the world, and yes, I said thousands, have even dedicated an entire room in their house just to hoard their unopened boxes of Funko Pops for no practical reason whatsoever. It is genuinely mind-boggling. I've been dealing with a lot of depression lately. This just showed up in the mail and I really needed this boost today. Ah yes, a plastic figure of a grey man from a mass-market consumer show. I'm sure that will fix your underlying issues. Ugh. But regardless of whether it's addictive consumerism or social status consumerism, both are often spurred on by what can only be described as a festering cancer that lingers at the heart of Western society. Advertisements. It's been estimated that in the 1970s, the average person would see around 500 ads per day. In the 2000s, this number had risen to around 5,000, 10 times as much. Meanwhile today, in the 2020s, this number is estimated to be around 7,000 and rising. And it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're in real life or on the internet, no one is safe from being bombarded with unwanted and unwelcome advertisements, constantly trying to sell you crap you don't need, or most of the time, really even want. I personally despise advertisements so much that despite having 10 times the subscribers and watch time required to apply for YouTube monetization, I still haven't pressed the button to do so, simply because I hate ads, and I wouldn't want you being hassled to see any. Think of all the pennies I've lost. Not that that doesn't stop them putting ads on my productions anyway, but besides the point. To say that advertisements have become an unwelcome but widespread part of everyday life would be an understatement, and ads are more prevalent than ever around Christmas. Much like how Christmas transformed from being an event with a questionable reputation for drunken disorder to being family-orientated, over the last few decades, Christmas has undergone yet another transformation. An annual, soulless consumerist ritual whereby people are unjustly pressured to empty their bank accounts to buy unnecessary tat they don't need, simply because everyone else does, and it's what is expected of them. Frankly, I don't particularly care if you're religious or not. However, if you don't find it even slightly unnerving that all of the spiritual events the Western world traditionally celebrated have all slowly transmogrified into just being days designed to sell you stuff, then I honestly don't know what to tell you. Easter went from being a day of celebrating the resurrection of Christ to being a day designed to sell you a chocolate egg. Valentine's Day went from being a feast celebrating a saint to being a day designed to brainwash you into buying your partner a bunch of tat. But of course, out of all the days, Christmas is the big one because it simply has no rules, no theme. Christ has been removed from his own day in everything but name. The celebration looks the same, sounds the same, and to many may even feel the same. But deep down, it's not the same. Not at all. It's as if the Western world operates today as a civilization that has dementia. We celebrate events, yet have no idea why. The pomp remains, but the spirit is gone. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not nagging at people for buying nice things. I like nice things. We all like nice things. Don't think for a second I'm one of those minimalists who expects you to live in an empty room and live off water and white bread for the rest of your life. No. But surely I can't be the only one who's noticed just how materialistically obsessed people have become today. We even invent new days out of thin air just to coerce people into buying more crap. Mother's Day, yet another day whereby you're emotionally blackmailed to buy yet more products.
Hey son, you better buy your mummy those flowers or she'll think you don't love her anymore.
Piss off. Oh, and of course, Father's Day, which is the exact same thing, just in reverse. Not that anyone actually has a father these days. It's clear that all these religious events, especially Christmas, has transformed significantly from its origins. The question is, however, why? Well, in my view, if one wants to know who is to blame for the consumerization of Christian events, one only needs to look at the so-called Christians themselves, for allowing their faith to slowly die, as it has. What it means to be a Christian is very simple. To obey the 10 Commandments, to follow the wisdom of the Bible, to try to live as Jesus would live. Yet modern-day Christians don't do any of these whatsoever. Though there are some rare few dedicated Christians, those who aren't completely delusional will be forced to admit that Christianity is not the powerhouse faith that it once was. The average person who identifies as a Christian in the Western world today doesn't know the 10 Commandments, never reads the Bible, and in truth, barely knows anything about Jesus at all. To them, Christianity is nothing more than a symbolic historical artifact that they think they belong to due to inheriting it, but don't actually maintain whatsoever. Like a plant that hasn't been watered, the faith has slowly withered, and is now on life support. Its titanic legacy giving it the illusion of life, but its lack of action quickly proving otherwise. This should not be too surprising, however, as how can the average Joe be expected to take a religion seriously when its own priests and pastors don't, with many pathetically attempting to bend the millennia-old rules of the faith to try to appeal to the modern era. A faith should change the world, not have the world change it. The only thing that even relates Christmas to Christ in the modern era is the word Christmas itself, Christmas. But even that is attempting to be destroyed. In America, I've seen people actually use the phrase Happy Holidays as a substitute for Merry Christmas. An attempted transmogrification from a religious event into a soulless event that could mean anything to anyone. When all you care about is watching movies, playing video games, and worshipping celebrities, then don't be surprised when that slowly becomes your new religion. This is what you were, and this is what you are now. If you take a frog and put it in boiling water, it will jump out, knowing that you're trying to kill it. But if you put the frog in cold water, then slowly turn the heat up, it will die slowly, without even realizing it. And this is what happened to Christmas. With every year that passed, Christmas changed and became less about religion and more about products. Jesus Christ, very slowly, became Santa Claus. Christmas has become so detached from what it originally was meant to be that it ironically proves the point of the Puritans who banned it, as they thought that Christmas ultimately would distract away from Christianity, and it seems that they were completely right. And I believe that the death, or perhaps more accurately, hijacking of Christmas from being a Christian religious event into becoming the Coca Cola sponsored mess that it is today, also serves as a metaphor for Christian civilization itself. The Christians, with each generation, became less inclined to scripture and more inclined to finance. And oh indeed, does it show. Today, throughout the Western world, there are many beautiful churches, yet they stand not as places of active worship, but as mere museums of a civilization long past. No different to that of the pyramids of Egypt. Is this because Christianity itself was doomed to fail, being a flawed religion, or that the people themselves failed it? That, dear viewer, is for you to decide. But what matters to me is not the past, but the future. Despite the negativity of this production, however, I am actually quite optimistic for the future. As time passes, more and more people are starting to see that we, as individuals, have the power to not buy crap we don't need and become mindless consumerist drones, living a life of purposeless distraction. And with every day that passes, more and more people are slowly opening their eyes to the pantomime society that we live in. People are beginning to tune out of the false economy, the lying media, the bought and paid for politicians, and of course, the perverted entertainment industry. And it's only a matter of time before the current cretins that run our nations and their class of idealistic failures are forever voted out of power, socially and economically, once and for all. Because mindless consumerism and godlessness is not a permanent civilization, as the chaos and decadence such an environment provides simply cannot last, making it nothing more than a temporary period of decline. The question is not will this current circus of consumerism cease, but what will replace it? If only there was some sort of religion that predicted the demise of Christianity, was much stricter than it, and is only getting stronger with each second that passes. Merry Christmas. For the last time, from me. Alright folks, I hope you enjoyed that. I am currently recording this at 7 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day, and despite all my talk about how much I hate consumerism, I can't help but think that right now, as I record this, a lot of children are going to be waking up around the country and the world to open presents, and I wonder if it is like this time in the morning where planetary happiness for humans is at its maximum annual amount, if that makes any sense. It's like now is the happiest time of the year, technically. It's quite incredible. It's just, it's sad that the religious elements have been completely destroyed out of the event, and all that remains is materialism. But hey, that will fix itself in time, one way or another. Either way, folks, you've really got to get your ass on Twitter, by the way. I mean, I don't think I convinced many of you to get on Twitter, but I am having an amazing time on Twitter. And I really mean that. Like, I love it. I'm like addicted to Twitter, and I never thought I'd say that. So get on over there, will you? Good lord. But either way, as ever, I'd like to give a shout out to the Wall of Famers. I'd like to welcome Andrew Halliday. Hello, Andrew. Very nice of you, by the way. I only just noticed. Very polite of you to pledge a regular at the Hex Radio on Discord. And I'd also like to thank Reginald for his increase in the pledge. Thank you very much, sir. That is so polite of you. Nevertheless, folks, I've been up all morning, and I'm going to be up for the rest of the day, so I kind of want to get this over with and have some carrot cake, so if you don't mind, I'll see you next time.